10 years ago, a portal to another world suddenly appeared on Earth. Countless monsters surged from the ground. Human firearms, once a source of pride, couldn't even kill the weakest goblins. Fortunately, among humans, powerful individuals known as hunters emerged. With their magical power, they are classified into 6 levels from S to E. Once awakened, no matter how hard the awakeners try, their abilities will no longer grow. Although hunters appeared among humans, they were still at a disadvantage in battle. Numerous hunters became food for the monsters. If not for the participation of several S-class hunters, the entire surface of the Earth would have become a paradise for monsters. Mizushino Shun is also a member of the large army of hunters, but he is the lowest E-class hunter, and his abilities are the weakest among the E-class. Even the weakest goblins could fight him to a draw, so he always comes back from missions covered in wounds. His friend Eri is extremely worried about him, but Shun dismisses her concerns and insists on participating in missions. This time, the team leader is Isao, who is also the highest-ranked hunter in the team. Soon, everyone entered the portal. After everyone had entered, Shun pulled out a worn dagger because he was too poor to afford higher-level equipment, so he had to fight with this broken blade. Hunters can obtain magic stones from the bodies of monsters. Magic stones obtained from high-level monsters can be used to craft various equipment. Although mana stones mined from dungeons can also be used to craft equipment, they are not as effective as magic stones. However, as a new energy source, their effect is quite good, and they do not cause environmental pollution, making them the most ideal green energy. Shun, after much effort, only obtained a low-level magic stone, and during the battle, his weapon broke, and he was stabbed in the waist by a goblin. Fortunately, his teammates appeared in time to save Shun. Eri rushed forward to heal Shun's injuries, and ultimately snatched him back from the brink of death. Eri was very angry, warning that if things continued this way, Shun might one day die for good. Soon, Isao killed the dungeon's boss, and the others received rich rewards. But Shun's loot was only an E-class magic stone, which was not a profitable exchange. At that moment, a teammate discovered a hidden passage, indicating that the dungeon was a double-layered dungeon. There must be more prey deeper in the passage. Isao told everyone that in such situations they should first report to the Hunters Association, but his teammates argued that this would mean only getting leftovers from others. Since it was a D-class dungeon, there shouldn't be any problems. After some hesitation, since no one knew the difficulty of this dungeon, Isao proposed a vote. The result was 6 in favor and 6 against, with only Shun left to vote. Although he knew that a D-class dungeon was dangerous, thinking of his bedridden mother and his sister who was preparing for exams, he cast his vote in favor. Meanwhile, on a bustling street, a gang of motorcycle thieves was robbing in broad daylight. Just when they thought they had it under control, a girl suddenly appeared in front of them, blocking their way. She leapt up, performed a graceful somersault, and landed smoothly. Then, the thieves also fell to the ground. The girl calmly took a backpack, and this girl was none other than Kusaka Shizuku, an S-class hunter at the pinnacle of hunters. The crowd gathered around her asking for autographs. Kusaka Shizuku, not liking the atmosphere, jumped away from there. On the other side, Shun and his group entered the hidden passage. He apologized to Eri. If it wasn't for his affirmative vote, Eri wouldn't have been forced to come down. But Eri didn't mind. Shun reconfirmed, "Are you sure it's really okay?" Next second, Eri angrily questioned, "How could it possibly be okay?" Shun realized, if not for Eri, a B-class healer, his grave grass would probably be 2.5 meters tall by now. Seeing Shun reflecting, Eri didn't say much more but suggested, "If you really feel sorry, just buy me a meal next time." Soon, everyone reached the end. In front of them was a giant stone door. As the stone door was pushed open, the torches in the hall automatically lit up. The spacious room was filled with many giant statues, and one of them was particularly large, but there was not a single monster in the room. Soon, they discovered a stone slab inscribed with text, "Worship God, praise God, prove your faith. Those who do not obey these commandments will not be able to leave this place." Eri suddenly grabbed Shun, saying that the eyes of the giant statue seemed to have moved just now. At that moment, the door suddenly closed automatically. A teammate tried to push the door to leave. Isao warned him to get away from there. Shun was terrified. As a D-class adventurer, being instantly killed by an axe. Such a monster was impossible to defeat. At this moment, Shun finally realized if the statue could move, then what Eri had said must be true. The next second, Shun and the statue locked eyes. At this moment, Shun's life flashed before his eyes. He had survived many life-threatening situations, been severely wounded by E-class monsters, nearly starved to death trapped in a maze. Unlike others who survived by sheer power, Shun's survival was due to his keen sense of danger. He yelled for everyone to get down. A flash of lightning swept across, clearing the field. And Shun finally realized, this time, he might not survive, all because the giant statue would kill anyone standing up. But a man nearby didn't believe it. Confident in his speed, thinking he could escape in just 2.5 seconds. In the end, only his feet remained. Seeing this, Shun immediately shouted to everyone to kneel to the statue. Hearing this, without hesitation, everyone knelt in worship to the statue. When everyone knelt down, the eyes of the statue dimmed, but the next second, it revealed a sinister smile. Seeing the statue stop attacking, everyone finally breathed a sigh of relief. But before they could even celebrate with champagne, the statue stood up and looked down at the people like ants. As the stone statue approached step by step, Shun immediately remembered the second rule of the decrees, which was to praise God. This meant that only by praising God could the statue be stopped. At this moment, a man stood up. He had studied many religions, and flattering God was a piece of cake for him. Sure enough, the statue stopped after hearing the man's praises. But Shun noticed something was amiss. The next second, the statue's expression grew more ferocious, raising its 400-yard jade foot. A female teammate was so frightened that she collapsed to the ground, but the statue had no mercy and crushed her into mush with one foot. People scattered in all directions. A chubby man hid beside another statue, but the next second, a slash of sword light split him in half. As Shun fled, he pondered how to praise these statues. He then noticed that the statues that attacked people were holding weapons, while those holding musical instruments did not attack. Shun seemed to have an idea and shouted for everyone to run under the statues holding musical instruments. Isao was the first to reach a musical statue, which indeed did not attack him, and even played a melodious tune. Seeing this, others quickly followed suit. Soon, Shun brought Eri to a musical statue, but strangely, the statue did not play any music. Shun quickly realized that one musical statue could only correspond to one person, so he asked Eri to stay there while he looked for other musical statues. At this time, the giant statue also had its eyes on Shun. Just as Shun was beginning to despair, a musical statue finally appeared in front of him, but the next second, the giant statue's foot stomped towards Shun. The terrifying blast threw Shun to another statue, and just as he was about to be crushed by a shield, Eri screamed, "No!" Unexpectedly, Shun survived the statue's attack, but he was already severely injured and could not run again, only crawling towards the musical statue with his hands. Just as the giant statue's foot was about to crush Shun into mush, the musical statue in front of him finally emitted a beautiful song. After hearing so much praise, the giant statue returned to its throne. Eri hurried over to check on him, but the next second, she showed a horrified expression, as Shun's right leg had been smashed by the statue. Seeing this, Eri quickly used her healing skills to stop Shun's bleeding. Eri exerted all her effort to heal Shun, successfully saving his life. Meanwhile, a man began to blame Isao, claiming that it was all his fault for the current situation. Isao heard this and took all the blame without arguing. Seeing this, Shun was speechless, wondering why they were shirking responsibility at a moment of life and death, instead of thinking about the last decree. At that moment, the statue suddenly raised its left hand, and a stone platform slowly rose in the center of the temple. Shun recognized at a glance that this platform was an altar, which in many mythological stories is used to place offerings to the gods. The third decree, "Prove your faith," must mean to make offerings. Suddenly, the man pointed his sword at Isao. "It's all your fault. Now it's your turn to take responsibility." Isao did not resist after hearing, but slowly walked to the center of the altar. However, there were no other changes in the altar except for a flame that had been kindled. Shun fell into deep thought, wondering if it wasn't a sacrifice that was needed. He asked two teammates to support him over, so he could closely observe the altar. Although a bit scared, the two still helped Shun into the altar. After the three entered, 3 more flames lit up around the altar. When everyone was inside, the number of flames reached 6. Several blue lightning bolts emerged from the center of the altar, igniting the outermost blue flames. The next second, the temple's main gate slowly opened. With the extinguishing of a blue flame, the surrounding statues also began to move. After observing for a while, Shun realized that the statues would stop when stared at directly. As long as everyone cooperated, they could prevent the statues from approaching. Although they knew the rules, the pressure was too much for some. One of them ran away first. As she ran out of the altar's range, the statues did not attack her, but a flame on the altar went out. Seeing her escape successfully, another teammate could not resist the temptation and abandoned Shun without looking back, causing another flame to go out and the door to close a bit. Shun quickly reminded the remaining people to keep their gaze fixed to maintain the situation. The outermost blue flame acted as a timer. Once it completely extinguished, they could be saved. However, one man did not believe this and wondered what they would do if the gate closed when the blue flame went out. Unwilling to gamble with his life, he declared he could not hold on and chose to leave. With only 3 people left, they couldn't keep all the statues in check. As the statues approached step by step, Isao hurriedly told Eri to take Shun and leave, guessing that the door wouldn't close if one person stayed. But the next second, Eri collapsed, apparently exhausted from treating Shun earlier. Shun then told Isao to take Eri and leave since Isao was the only one free to move. She nervously said it was not possible, and that it was no time for jokes. The next second, Isao knocked Eri unconscious. Watching Isao and Eri leave, Shun finally breathed a sigh of relief, regretting not buying more insurance, so his sick mother and school-going sister wouldn't struggle financially if he died. Just as Shun was prepared to die, all the statues attacked him repeatedly, severing his limbs and leaving a huge hole in his chest. As he was about to be dismembered by the monsters, a system prompt suddenly came into his mind, announcing the completion of the hidden task, Courage of the Weak, and offering him the status of a player. He had to accept within 0.02 seconds or die. Shun decisively accepted. When he opened his eyes again, he found himself back on Earth and his severed limbs had regrown. Shun was amazed. He had clearly been killed by the monsters. So how had he revived? Was it all just a dream? At this time, 2 men in suits walked in. They were staff members from the Hunter Association's inspection department. They had come to investigate the matter concerning the double dungeon. It was then that Shun learned that he had been unconscious for 3 days and nights. He quickly asked the two, "Have Isao and Eri been saved?" The investigator told Shun that Isao had lost an arm, and as such, he was likely to choose to retire. Eri, on the other hand, had suffered severe psychological trauma, and it was uncertain whether she could continue to work as a hunter in the future. Only 6 people survived from the double dungeon. When the investigators arrived at the dungeon, they did not find the giant statues mentioned by the survivors, only finding Shun severely injured. The two suspected that Shun had completed his second awakening unconsciously. Otherwise, it would have been impossible for him to survive in such a dire situation. Although a hunter's ability values are fixed at the time of awakening, there are a very few chosen ones who can undergo a second awakening, surpassing their own limits to become A-level or even S-level hunters. Shun was very happy. Could he be that chosen one? The investigators brought out a magic detector. Just by placing his hand on it, one could check their attributes. If Shun really had completed his second awakening, then he would definitely become the target of major guilds' competition. Initially, the two thought Shun could at least be an A-level hunter, but looking at the magic value of 10 points on the detector, the two fell into deep thought. Even the lowest E-level hunters have a magic value of 70 points, and Shun only had 10 points, which is basically no different from an ordinary person. The two lost interest in investigating this weakling, and starkly left the place. Shun was speechless. Didn't you notice this thing? A system interface appeared above Shun's head. He seemed to have seen this interface before when he was on the brink of death. Could it be that he survived because of this system? At that moment, the system suddenly issued a prompt, releasing the daily task, Preparation to Become Strong. Complete 100 push-ups, sit-ups, squats, and run 10 kilometers. Failure to complete them all will result in punishment from the system. Shun scoffed at this. I'm not that bald guy. Who has the time to do these things? Soon, it was midnight, and while Shun was soundly asleep, the system suddenly issued a punishment task. The ground began to shake violently. Shun thought it was an earthquake, but the next second, he was transported to a desert and a giant centipede appeared behind him. He had to survive under the centipede's attacks for 4 hours to leave. At that moment, Shun greatly regretted not completing the task, as he wouldn't have to suffer so much. Just as the centipede was about to eat Shun, the punishment time finally ended. Shun was also transported back to the hospital. Having learned his lesson, Shun dared not ignore the system tasks anymore and insisted on training every day, more disciplined than Saitama. Although the current intensity of the exercises was a bit much for him, fortunately, completing the tasks also earned him rewards from the system, not only allowing him to instantly recover, but also giving him 3 points of freely distributable attribute points. Shun decisively added points to his strength. As his ability values increased, Shun's strength also continuously grew. In fact, he indeed felt his strength increase, and the system was also equipped with skill and item slots. Although he didn't know what this was, it was clear that with this system he could definitely become stronger. After completing daily tasks, the system would also issue a random treasure chest. And today Shun was lucky, having found a key to a time-limited dungeon in the random treasure chest. To earn money for his critically ill mother's treatment, Shun knew he had to become stronger. He remembered when he first awakened. Although he became a 1 in 1,000 hunter, his own strength couldn't even defeat the weakest goblin. Then Shun went to the subway station, activated the time-limited dungeon, and went in without looking back. The moment he stepped into the dungeon, the entrance behind him immediately closed, but people inside the subway station seemed unaffected. It seemed this was a completely different dimensional space. As Shun was puzzled, the system sent another prompt. He could only leave the dungeon by defeating the boss or using a return stone. That meant if he didn't defeat the boss, Shun would be trapped here for life. But for someone who couldn't even conquer an E-level dungeon alone, soloing a dungeon was simply fantastical. Yet Shun had no way out now, and had to bravely enter the dungeon. Just as he entered, Shun encountered 3 goblins. The goblins' attacks were very swift. Shun couldn't find an opportunity to counterattack, and could only keep dodging the goblins' attacks. Fortunately, Shun's attribute values had significantly improved, and although he couldn't overpower the goblins, he wasn't crushed to the ground as before. However, the number of goblins was too great. Shun was soon sent flying by a goblin. In such a dire situation, Shun's potential was finally unleashed. He angrily killed the goblin. Before Shun could even celebrate his victory, a red giant wolf suddenly appeared and bit Shun's weapon in half. Shun could clearly feel this red giant wolf was much stronger than the previous 3 goblins. As Shun's legs trembled, not knowing what to do, the giant wolf took advantage of the situation and charged. But the next second, Shun instinctively dodged the attack. His body suddenly felt lighter, and at this moment, he finally understood. He was no longer the weakest E-class hunter. He shouted, "How could I just die like this?" Although Shun's physical fitness had improved significantly, just his fists were not enough to inflict effective damage on the demon wolf, and he was almost fatally bitten by the demon wolf. As Shun dealt with the demon wolf, he thought about how to handle it. Soon, he remembered that there was a weapon in his item slot. He drew the weapon and killed the demon wolf in an instant. Shun's level also increased, his injuries completely healed, but before he could relax, 2 more demon wolves appeared in front. The next second, the demon wolves charged at Shun, but this time, Shun's weapon got stuck in the ground. Just as the demon wolf's attack was about to hit Shun, Shun finally pulled out his weapon and engaged in combat with the demon wolf. But this demon wolf was not vegetarian either, and it bit Shun's weapon in just a moment. Seeing this, Shun did not hesitate to kick it, and used all his strength to split the demon wolf's head into 2 halves. Although the demon wolf was formidable, it was nothing compared to those giant statues. The surviving demon wolves, seeing Shun's prowess, immediately fled with their tails between their legs. At this moment, the system issued another prompt. Shun's level had increased to level 2, not only restoring him to his best condition, but also significantly enhancing his attributes. At this point, Shun realized that as long as he kept killing monsters, his strength would continue to grow. Shun then examined the corpse of the demon wolf. The monsters in the time-limited dungeon seemed different from those in regular dungeons. They didn't drop magic stones, but directly gave items which could also be sold in the system shop for coins. For example, the teeth of the demon wolf could be sold for 20 coins. Just as Shun was getting ready to continue leveling up, the previously escaped demon wolf came back with its numerous relatives to give Shun a warm welcome. Although there were many demon wolves, Shun did not despair, as this was nothing compared to the dire situations he had faced before. In order to become stronger, Shun overcame his inner fear and activated mowing mode, where not a single demon wolf could withstand a single blow from him, turning into experience points, continuously providing Shun with experience. After slaying all the demon wolves, Shun also earned the title of Wolf Slayer, which increased all his abilities by 40% when fighting beast-type monsters, and the group of demon wolves also successfully dropped a return stone. Using the return stone, Shun could immediately leave the place, but at this point, he did not want to leave just yet. Having finally found a way to become stronger, he was not willing to give up so easily. Rather than living aimlessly, he preferred to take a chance. After some time leveling up, Shun also learned some of the rules of the time-limited dungeon. If the monster's name is white, it means its strength is weaker than his. If it is orange, it means the monster's strength is comparable to his. If it is red, it indicates the monster's strength far surpasses his. Initially, the demon wolf's name was red, but now it had turned white, indicating that his own strength had significantly improved. Soon, Shun arrived at the entrance to the boss room. Just the aura leaking from the boss was enough to send chills down one's spine. The old Shun would have left without a second thought, but now, Shun's mindset had changed significantly, and he resolutely entered the boss room. However, there was no sign of the boss inside the room. Just as Shun wondered where the boss was, a figure burst out of the water and sent Shun flying, even breaking his weapon in half. The next second, a giant snake, thousands of meters long, suddenly appeared, staring straight at Shun, and this giant snake was the biggest boss in the time-limited dungeon. Before Shun could react, the giant snake lifted a train and smashed it towards Shun. Although he thought he had become stronger, in front of absolute power, he still felt so frail, but he did not give up. Rather than being ridiculed for life, he preferred to fight vigorously. He turned all his frustrations into a fighting spirit. His recent experiences made him deeply aware of the importance of strength. The weak can only be toys for the strong, forever unable to turn the tables. In this world, being weak is the original sin. Even if one is knowledgeable and of good character, in front of the strong they will be ruthlessly betrayed. Gentleness is meaningless. Only by becoming stronger can one overcome all difficulties. In an instant, Shun unleashed incredible power and eventually defeated the giant snake. Afterward, Shun's level increased, and he also obtained a new weapon with an attack power of 25 points, which also had poison and paralysis effects. Additionally, he obtained a potion that could reduce physical damage by 20%, but at the cost of reducing strength by 35%. After tallying his spoils, the time-limited dungeon completely disappeared, and Shun returned to the original world. As soon as Shun exited the subway station, he found the streets deserted and saw signs of destruction. And not far away, he sensed the presence of a monster, apparently because the seal of a portal had been broken. As Shun expected, a hunter squad was currently attacking a stone man. But this squad only had one D-rank hunter who was a tank, and the other 8 were E-rank hunters, so they were unable to deal a fatal blow to the stone man, resulting in a prolonged battle. Shun also spotted Eri among the healers in the back, who still had not overcome her inner fear, and every time she released a healing skill, she was forced to stop due to psychological reasons. Thus, Shun decided to help Eri. As long as the stone man's defense was broken, they should be able to win the battle. He decided to deliver a blow strong enough to penetrate rock. Watch out. Shun broke the monster's defense, and the rest rushed up and finally killed the stone man. Only the tank clearly saw that someone had helped them, but by the time he turned around, Shun had already quietly left. The man only exercised in the hospital for 2.5 hours each day, turning from a weakling into a muscular man with 8-pack abs, capable of mesmerizing the nurse with just a glance. Today was Shun's discharge day. The nurse hurriedly took out her phone and asked Shun for his contact information, but Shun, being straightforward, thought it was to facilitate notifying him of hospital checkups, so he promptly added the nurse. After returning home, his sister noticed Shun's transformation. His previously thin body now resembled that of a bodybuilder, and even his height had increased significantly. Although Shun had changed a lot, his sister did not probe further. After seeing his sister out, Shun opened his system panel. He guessed that it was due to the increase in attribute points that he had developed muscles. As long as he continued to exercise, he was sure to become even stronger. After allocating his recently earned attribute points, the landlord called. It turned out that since Shun had been hospitalized, his rent had been in arrears. Shun is now broke and can't afford to pay rent. However, his skills have improved considerably, so earning the rent shouldn't be a problem. Therefore, he promised the landlord to transfer the rent tomorrow. Then, Shun started looking for jobs on a recruitment app, but his rank is still E, so there aren't many jobs available. If he could re-evaluate his rank, he might be able to take on higher level jobs, which would secure his income. However, doing so would be too conspicuous. Awakened beings like him, who grow stronger as they level up, are rare, and he risks being captured for research if not careful. Thus, Shun dismissed the idea of re-evaluating his rank and decided to first strengthen his abilities. At this point, Shun found a recruitment message. It had no requirements regarding the hunter's rank and promised a substantial reward just for entering a C-level dungeon. Soon, Shun arrived at the job location on foot and also completed his daily tasks. The team leader, Hwang Dong-suk, greeted Shun warmly. One of the team members recognized Shun immediately. Isn't he the legendary weakest human weapon? Seeing this, Hwang Dong-suk immediately stopped the team member's disrespectful behavior and sincerely apologized to Shun, appearing as a naive and honest person. Although aware that Shun is the weakest E-rank hunter, Hwang Dong-suk didn't mind since he was just looking to fill numbers. To conquer the C-level dungeon, at least 8 hunters are needed, with at least 4 being C-rank. Since Hwang Dong-suk's team only had 6 members, they needed someone like Shun to complete the numbers. Since Shun isn't counted as part of the combat force, he wouldn't receive any loot. As compensation, Hwang Dong-suk offered Shun 2 million as a fee, and all Shun had to do was help carry the luggage. Shun asked why there were no healers in Hwang Dong-suk's team. Hwang Dong-suk evasively answered that it's tough for private teams to recruit healers, but assured that his team has always managed without one. Shun noticed something odd about the team, but didn't care, and promptly signed the contract. The contract was simple. No matter what happens in the dungeon, no claims can be made against Hwang Dong-suk's team. He wanted to see what tricks Hwang Dong-suk's team might play. At that moment, a D-rank hunter named Moribisi Kenta greeted Shun warmly. Like Shun, he was also brought in to fill numbers. Although younger than Shun, his hunter rank was 1 level higher. Shun was shocked. A D-rank hunter wearing such luxurious gear. Could he be a rich second generation experiencing life? Moribisi Kenta didn't discriminate against Shun. Instead, he promised to protect him, leaving Shun speechless. After preparations, the group entered the C-level dungeon. Oddly, this dungeon had neither the usual luminescent stones for lighting nor any sign of monsters. Moribisi Kenta didn't know what luminescent stones were, so Shun explained that they are common glowing stones found underground, usually hanging on walls or ceilings to faintly light up dungeons. After walking for half a day, the group still hadn't encountered any monsters. Just then, Shun suddenly heard the sound of a monster moving. Shun deduced from the sound that it was an insect-type monster. Upon hearing this, everyone immediately entered battle mode. However, there were too many caves here, and Hwang Dong-suk couldn't determine from which direction the monster would emerge. Fortunately, Shun's hearing was extraordinary, and he quickly figured out the direction from which the monster was coming. With Shun's warning, the group discovered the location of the ants in advance. Moribisi Kenta stepped in front of Shun, and the other members began their roles in hunting the ants with clear division of tasks. Hwang Dong-suk used a provocation skill to draw all the ants aggro, allowing the tank to attract the aggro while the other teammates focused on damage output. Despite not having a healer, Hwang Dong-suk's team was one of the most coordinated teams Shun had ever seen. After gathering all the ants together, the team's mage unleashed a powerful spell that wiped out most of the ants. The rest of the team immediately moved forward to finish off the remaining ones. At that moment, an ant that slipped through the net charged at Shun. Shun didn't even turn his head. simply kicking and beheading it with one foot. Soon, all the ants were exterminated, and the group began to scavenge the magic stones from the ants' bodies. Huang Dongsuk came forward to thank Shun. Without his early warning about the ants' location, the battle would not have been so easily won. Then a team member called Huang Dongsuk over, having discovered some strange wounds on the ants' bodies that didn't look like they were caused by weapons, but more like bite marks. It seemed that there was an even more terrifying monster hunting this group of ants. The monster capable of hunting these ants was definitely not to be underestimated. Soon the group arrived at the boss room, which was filled with countless mana stones. Although mana stones were not as valuable as magic stones, the sheer quantity here was worth at least 10 minor golds. If they could transport all these mana stones, it would be enough for Huang Dongsuk's team to live lavishly every day. While everyone was discussing how to divide this wealth, Morobisi Kenta suddenly asked to see the contract Shun had signed. He then brought Shun's contract to Huang Dongsuk. According to the contract, Shun was not entitled to a share of the spoils, but these mana stones were not considered spoils, meaning Shun was also eligible to share. Upon hearing this, Huang Dongsuk was not angry, but instead generously stated that he would definitely distribute them fairly. However, this had to be done after dealing with the boss in the room. The teleportation gate would close automatically after defeating the boss, so they had to transport all the mana stones out before defeating the boss to maximize their gains. Fortunately, the boss was currently asleep, giving the group enough time to mine the mana stones. Huang Dongsuk asked the team members to bring out the mining tools, but they said they hadn't anticipated this and had left the tools in the car. Thus, Huang Dongsuk instructed Shun and Morobisi Kenta to stay here while they went out to fetch the tools. Morobisi Kenta was somewhat worried, but Huang Dongsuk reassured him that the boss had eaten its fill and would pose no threat as long as they didn't provoke it in the short term. After hearing this, Morobisi Kenta didn't have much to say anymore. Once everyone left the boss room, Huang Dongsuk eagerly commanded the mage to block the entrance. The mage, used to such antics, immediately sealed the entrance with magic. Morobisi Kenta was furious. These guys are actually planning to kill us just for a few mana stones. Morobisi Kenta said, "It's all my fault for mentioning the contract, that's why this happened." But Shun had already known. Even if Morobisi Kenta hadn't mentioned the contract, those people would definitely have acted ruthlessly. The loud explosion also woke up the sleeping boss. Faced with the terrifying strength of the C-class boss, Shun was not scared. Instead, he looked eager to try. To monopolize the mana stones, Huang Dongsuk's team locked Shun and Morobisi Kenta in the boss room, trying to use the boss to eliminate the two. After the boss had its fill, they planned to return to the room through a secret passage to mine the mana stones. Even if the boss wasn't asleep, they could still collect Morobisi Kenta's equipment, worth billions after killing the boss. In either scenario, Huang Dongsuk's team would make a huge profit. But Huang Dongsuk could never have dreamed that Shun, once called the weakest human weapon, had completely transformed. Even the terrifying C-class boss was just an experience pack for his leveling. Although the boss's attack power was very formidable, Shun's agility was even better. No matter how the boss attacked, it couldn't gain the upper hand against Shun, while Shun managed to attack the boss while evading. But the boss's defense was too strong. Shun's attacks couldn't inflict effective damage. Seeing Shun fighting the C-class boss, Morobisi Kenta finally realized that Shun was definitely not a low-level E-class hunter. Morobisi Kenta suddenly looked terrified, because Shun resembled the legendary cheaters. Cheaters are those who deliberately lower their level ratings to participate in low-level missions, and these people are often murderous psychopaths. Morobisi Kenta really felt like dying. First, betrayed by his teammates and trapped here, and now there was a cheater. So, in the entire team, am I the only real newbie? After several rounds of fighting, Shun hadn't gained any advantage, and his fatigue level had reached 57. As the fatigue level increased, Shun's speed would decrease. If he didn't quickly defeat this boss, he would surely die. So Shun switched his weapon to a poison fang, hoping to achieve a paralyzing or bleeding effect that might defeat the boss. Shun targeted the boss's eyes, and as he charged at the boss suddenly spat out a glob of phlegm. Shun quickly dodged backward, and the ground was corroded into a large pit. If he had taken that hit head-on, Shun would have been finished. With its hard outer shell and corrosive liquid, this boss was tougher than Shun had anticipated. Continuing like this, there was no chance of winning. To close the distance with the boss, Shun used a newly learned sprint skill, trying to reach the boss in one go. This strike didn't hit the boss's eyes, but Shun didn't get discouraged. Relying on his agile movements, he dodged the boss's attacks while rapidly closing in. But the very next second, Shun's fatigue reached its limit. He was caught by the boss and slapped away with a smack. Suddenly, Shun remembered that he hadn't yet claimed today's system reward, so he decisively chose to restore his state. Just 0.01 seconds before getting hit, he dodged the boss's attack. While the boss was stunned, Shun leaped forward to the boss's face and fiercely slashed at its Caecilian big eyes. With the boss's death, Shun also leveled up 3 times. After removing the magic stone from the boss, Moribisi Kenta hurried over. Before Shun could understand the situation, he heard the voice of Huang Dongsuk's squad. Seeing that Shun and Moribisi Kenta were not dead, Huang Dongsuk was somewhat surprised. But with Moribisi Kenta's superb equipment, defeating this boss was not impossible. Huang Dongsuk and his men did not attack Moribisi Kenta, but gave him a chance to live. As long as he killed Shun and became their accomplice, they would let Moribisi Kenta go. Of course, this was not out of Huang Dongsuk's mercy. After all, Moribisi Kenta had killed a sea-level boss with this high-grade equipment. If those equipments had any special effects, it would be troublesome. But having seen Shun's strength, Moribisi Kenta naturally would not choose to be Shun's enemy. Seeing Moribisi Kenta stand by Shun, Huang Dongsuk no longer held back. He and his men slowly approached the two. At this moment, the system issued an emergency mission to kill 6 enemies. Seeing Shun distracted, the mage quickly released a powerful attack on Shun. Shun was caught off guard and was knocked dozens of meters away. This attack also made Shun fully realize the dungeon was indeed a place of survival of the fittest. The system then sent another prompt. If the player did not follow the system's instructions to complete the mission, their heart would stop beating. It seemed the system was forcing him to kill. At this moment, Shun had no choice. Only by completing the mission could he survive. At this moment, Shun put aside all his mercy and declared death to Huang Dongsuk's squad. Are you also prepared to be killed? An E-rank hunter daring to talk big. This made Huang Dongsuk and his men both angry and amused. Just when the small fry were ready to teach Shun a lesson, Shun suddenly burst forth and chopped off his head. Seeing their teammate instantly killed, the others entered the battle state. But this was nothing before the darkened Shun. Only then did Huang Dongsuk finally understand it was not Moribisi Kenta who had killed the sea-level boss, but this legendary weakest human weapon. But he was not afraid. After all, no one could still be energetic after killing a boss and 5 hunters. Even though both were C-rank hunters, Huang Dongsuk still believed he could defeat Shun. But the next second, Shun taught him a harsh lesson. Seeing Shun so powerful, Huang Dongsuk finally cowered, offering to pay a sum of money to spare his life. But by then, Shun had already put away any compassion. Letting someone who harbored murderous intentions towards him leave alive did not seem like something a wise person would do. After killing Huang Dongsuk, the dungeon suddenly began to shake violently, a signal that the dungeon was about to close. Shun, seeing this, could only give up mining the mana stones and left the place with Moribisi Kenta. But Shun could never have imagined that he would be targeted by an S-rank hunter because of this incident. It is the strongest monster Shun has encountered since he obtained the system. A casual bite could take away 1/3 of Shun's health. However, Shun's attacks on it were like scratching an itch, causing no damage at all. Such a terrifying enemy is simply beyond the current Shun's capability. Today, as usual, Shun completed his daily tasks. But he did not claim the system rewards because he discovered that an extra kilometer he ran was also recorded in the daily tasks. Then he did 2 more push-ups, and sure enough, these were also recorded. Could it be that exceeding daily tasks would yield extra rewards? Thus, Shun ran an additional 12 kilometers, but the system only displayed 20 kilometers. It seems the daily tasks can only reach up to double. Following this, Shun maxed out other tasks as well, and after completing all tasks, the daily tasks upgraded to hidden tasks. The first 2 task rewards were still attribute points and recovery status, but the third random chest turned into a chest of blessings and curses. To be safe, Shun chose the chest of blessings, which did not disappoint him, and once again produced a key to a hidden dungeon. And this dungeon was S level, which was beyond his capability. Just as Shun was about to give up, he suddenly saw that this dungeon could drop the water of life, which cures all diseases. With this item, his mother might be saved. Therefore, Shun decisively launched the hidden dungeon, knowing that an S-level boss would definitely appear, but to save his seriously ill mother, he had no other choice, even if it meant losing his life. With a resolute heart, Shun entered the dungeon. If he really couldn't beat the boss, he could use a return stone to leave. Then, a three-headed hellhound appeared before Shun. Its terrifying presence alone indicated that this creature was not to be trifled with. Ordinary people would have been terrified at the sight of such a monstrous beast, but Shun was already used to it. He drew his dagger and activated the title Wolf Slayer, boosting all abilities by 40% when fighting beast-type monsters. Then, Shun activated the sprint skill, charging towards the hellhound like lightning. Shun attacked the hellhound with super fast speed, but the hellhound's defense was too high. Even with a 40% increase in attributes, Shun could not deal effective damage. Then, Shun unleashed a combo attack, creating numerous afterimages attacking the hellhound. But the damage was still minimal, and even the dagger's bleeding and paralysis effects could not be triggered. Seeing this, Shun decisively activated his killing intent, trying to reduce the hellhound's attributes by 50%, but the level gap was too large, and the killing intent could not affect the hellhound. Shun, with all his might, slashed at the hellhound, finally triggering the dagger's paralysis and bleeding effects. Shun's actions completely enraged the hellhound, which opened its huge mouth and bit Shun's arm, causing a lot of blood to spurt out, and this attack directly took away 1/3 of Shun's health. Immediately after, the three-headed hound flung Shun away and kicked him, causing Shun's health to drop by more than half. In just 2.5 seconds, he lost half of his health. A few more hits, and he would definitely be finished. Shun quickly pulled away from the distance. Seeing this, the three-headed hound decisively activated its rage skill, doubling all attribute values for 3 minutes. In an instant, it was right in front of Shun. Shun couldn't react in time and was slapped hundreds of meters away. Seeing his health nearly depleted, Shun decisively used a mission reward to recover to optimal condition. After a few rounds, Shun's health was depleted again, triggering a passive skill that reduced damage by 50%. Seeing the three-headed hound charging at him again, Shun decisively kicked up the dust on the ground to block the hound's vision and barely dodged the attack with a jump. Then, Shun found a hidden corner to hide. At this point, Shun was at his limit. Continuing to fight would surely lead to death. Just as he was about to use a return stone to leave, the three-headed hound, smelling his scent, charged over. While knocking the return stone away, it also inflicted a severe blow on Shun. Shun quickly distanced himself from the three-headed hound. Seeing his remaining health, Shun felt completely hopeless. A few more hits, and he would definitely be finished. At that moment, he suddenly remembered the system's shop, which just happened to have health recovery potions. Shun spent all his coins to buy 3 potions, but one potion could only restore 100 health points. Using all 3 only brought his health up to 800 points, which was merely a drop in the bucket. Then, Shun remembered the potion dropped by the serpent earlier. Although it would reduce his strength by 35%, it could increase his damage reduction by 20%. Shun had no choice but to take a risk. After drinking the potion, he successfully exploited the 20% damage reduction effect. At the same time, the three-headed hound's rage state just ended. The accumulated injuries exploded in an instant. Seeing this, Shun knew his opportunity had finally arrived, so he decisively charged at the three-headed hound. Unexpectedly, Shun was bitten by the three-headed hound, blood spurting out. But Shun did not give up and slowly raised his dagger to stab at the three-headed hound's eyes. Ultimately, Shun successfully defeated the three-headed hound and leveled up several times. His wounds also healed instantly. Then, Shun checked the rewards. He not only obtained the three-headed hound's teeth and collar, but also a key to the demon castle. Most importantly, Shun also obtained the blueprint for creating the Water of Life. However, the materials needed to make the Water of Life had to be obtained within the demon castle. After this battle, Shun realized his own lack of strength. If he entered the demon castle now, he would surely die, but he would definitely return in the not-too-distant future. The next day, Morabisi Kenta found Shun. It turned out that Morobisi Kenta's father wanted to form a strike team and would recruit an S-rank hunter as the chairman, with Morobisi Kenta's brother as the vice chairman. To compete with his brother, Morobisi Kenta offered a staggering 30 billion, inviting Shun to join his strike team. He was well aware that Shun's strength was definitely not E rank and was very likely B rank or even A rank. If he brought an E rank hunter to conquer the dungeon, he would surely gain his father's recognition. Such a generous reward in the past, Shun would have agreed without a second thought. But at this moment, Shun had realized that as long as he kept leveling up, he would definitely become a being that surpasses S rank. In this light, a mere 30 billion seemed insignificant. Seeing Shun refuse his request, Morobisi Kenta had no choice but to pull out all the stops. If Shun joined him, he would keep his secret for life. Meanwhile, on the other side, Huang Dongsuk's brother, Ukyu Masato, received the news of his brother's death. The prime suspects were naturally Shun and Morobisi Kenta. He intended to personally deal with these two to avenge his brother. That day, Shun received an emergency mission to subdue a D-class dungeon, which was somewhat unexpected to him. Surprisingly, the teammates who participated in the mission this time were all survivors from the last Cathernan Temple incident, including Kim and Hamura, who had abandoned Shun and fled alone. While Shun was catching up with Eri, suddenly 3 prisoners with a strong prison vibe appeared and started harassing Eri upon meeting her. It turned out that these 3 prisoners were also participating in this mission. Due to the scarcity of hunters, prisons often organize sentence reduction activities, allowing convicted prisoners to raid dungeons. Successful contributions could earn them a chance for sentence reduction. Moreover, this mission was also accompanied by a B-rank hunter Taisei, so dealing with 3 C-rank hunters was not a problem even if danger arose. However, Shun always felt something was off, so he advised Eri not to participate in this mission. But Eri, worried about Shun, insisted on joining him. The group then entered the D-class dungeon. As soon as they entered the dungeon, they were attacked by goblins. Fortunately, all of them were seasoned professional hunters and managed to eliminate them all in just 2.5 minutes. Soon the group came to a crossroads with 3 entrances. Taisei suggested splitting up to take different paths, which, although increased some risks, could finish the mission earlier. Taisei chose the right path, while Shun, who had perception skills, had already discovered which path the boss was on. Thus, he volunteered to take the left path with Isao and Eri, while Kim and Hamura chose the middle path. Just as they split up, Taisei decisively killed the few prisoners. It turned out that not long ago, a man approached Taisei because his daughter was violated by a 3-headed beast and eventually committed suicide, and his wife was also mentally scarred and had to be hospitalized. However, these 3-headed beasts, being professional hunters, could get sentence reductions by participating in assault missions and could be released just like nothing happened after a few years. This was something the man could not accept. Thus, he sold all his possessions and asked Taisei to eliminate these 3 scums during the mission. The scene of Taisei killing the prisoners was accidentally witnessed by Kim and Hamura. At this moment, Taisei also realized that the 3 paths were interconnected. Although caught red-handed, Taisei was not at all panicked, but instead pulled out the dagger from his waist, ready to kill and silence them. Meanwhile, on the other side, Shun heard a scream and immediately rushed towards the source of the sound. Besides the bodies of the 3 scums, Isao also found the dead bodies of Hamura and Kim. Isao did not understand why Taisei did this, but Taisei did not explain, and instead stated that he had already thought of a script. These prisoners who attempted to escape attacked you, and in the end, I avenged you by killing these prisoners. Isao then stepped forward. He still thought Shun was the weakest weapon of humanity as before, so he decided to personally deal with Taisei. Taisei is a B-rank hunter, while Isao is only C-rank. The only advantage is that they have a healer on their side. Isao asked Eri to cast physical enhancement magic on him. Assassins generally have low defense. If they attack this point, there is still a chance of survival. Seeing this, Taisei was disdainful and launched an attack immediately. After all, the opponent was just a mage-type hunter. Picking up the sword was meaningless. The next second, Isao also counterattacked. With 1 slash, he struck down. Taisei praised him, saying his skills were not bad, but that was all he could do. Soon, Isao was wounded on the shoulder. Luckily, Eri reacted quickly and healed him in time. Seeing this, Taisei immediately launched an attack on Eri. Fortunately, Isao promptly stopped him. Seeing that he couldn't kill the healer, Taisei then planned to kill Isao first. Eri wanted to heal, but her magic power had already been exhausted. Just as Taisei was about to finish Isao suddenly slapped the ground with one hand, casting his powerful fire-type ultimate move. But according to the law of smoke without harm, Taisei naturally was unscathed. Just when Isao thought all was lost, Shun finally made a move. Die. Taisei couldn't believe it. When he saw Shun in the hospital before, he was just a waste with only 10 magic power. He hadn't expected such a drastic change in just 2.5 months. He guessed that Shun must have undergone a second awakening. Shun asked Taisei why he killed people. Taisei said he was commissioned by the family of the victims. He was just administering justice. But Shun pierced through his lies in one sentence. If killing Kim and Hamura was to silence them, you could have ended the fight with one strike. But you deliberately avoided vital points to torture them. So you are not for justice, it is just your nature. The battle between the two was fiercely intense, and the speed was astonishingly fast. Even Isao could only see their after-images. It seemed that Taisei did not use his full strength in the fight with Isao. Although the two were not much different in combat power, Taisei, after all, was a veteran B-rank hunter. The gap in experience between them was not negligible. Soon, Shun was caught in a breach by him. Taisei's killing intent was as tangible as it spread out, and the system also sensed this killing intent. Thus, it issued another emergency mission, and this gave Shun another reason he had to kill Taisei. Shun rapidly attacked Taisei, and the two began a fierce battle. After a struggle, Shun's terrifying strength made Taisei take him seriously. He directly pulled out his best skill, invisibility. No one who had seen him use this move had ever lived to tell the tale. At this moment, Shun's Achilles tendon had been cut by Taisei. He did not believe Shun could block his attack in this condition, but the next second, Shun perfectly demonstrated to him what it means when absolute cheats make strength utterly insignificant. He instantly recovered from his injury. After a brief moment of surprise, Taisei again used the invisibility skill, but this time Shun easily blocked all his attacks and counterattacked with the active skill Killing Intent. Taisei was also impressed. He was curious about who Shun really was. Though a hunter specialized in assassination, Shun could use healing and debuff magic, which was unheard of. Shun himself also wanted to figure out what was happening to him. After Taisei died, the mission was completed. Shun received a rune stone and an invisibility skill, but he didn't feel happy about it. He realized that as he was getting stronger, something inside him seemed to be deteriorating. This was a very special assault team consisting of people who were either disabled or alcoholics, and even included an 18-year-old high school girl. They didn't need to venture deep into the dungeon. Just staying at the entrance would earn them 3 million in payment. This bizarre team was formed by Morobisi Kenta and Shun. Just recently, Chief Yu told Shun that Ukyu Masato, the S-rank hunter and younger brother of Huang Dongsuk, was targeting him. This was because only Shun and Morobisi Kenta survived the incident where Huang Dongsuk's team was wiped out. Regardless of whether they were the culprits or not, Ukyu Masato wouldn't let them go. I haven't even left the newbie village and I'm already being targeted by an S-rank hunter. How can I live like this? Moreover, the law couldn't restrain Ukyu Masato, who was an S-rank hunter. The best solution would be to leave the country with his family. But Shun was not frightened. Instead, it gave him more reason to become stronger. The next morning, Shun and Morobisi Kenta went to a C-rank dungeon. Shun was speechless because the teammates Morobisi Kenta brought were quite odd, including drunkards, disabled people, and even a high school girl, just to meet the minimum requirement of an 8-person squad for a C-rank dungeon. Although the teammates were a motley crew, Shun didn't mind. Only he and Morobisi Kenta would enter the dungeon, and the others would just stay at the entrance to collect their 3 million payment. It was a great deal where they could get paid without fighting, a rarity even if one searched with a lantern. As Morobisi Kenta and the others were setting the rules, Shun took out the rune stone rewarded by the system, which sealed Taisei's invisibility skill. Without a second thought, Shun crushed the rune stone and successfully acquired Taisei's invisibility skill. Meanwhile, Morobisi Kenta also changed into his gear. preparing to enter the dungeon with Shun. It's undeniable that the life of the wealthy is simple yet unrefined. Even their gear was custom-made from abroad. Unfortunately, this gear was all show and no substance. Shun lightly tapped Moribisi Kenta with one finger, causing him to fall over, unable to get up like a turtle flipped on its shell. Then, the two entered the C-rank dungeon. The others didn't believe that just the two of them could conquer a C-rank dungeon. But since they had already received their payment, whether the duo succeeded or not didn't concern them. One of the older men even mocked them, saying, "Are these two idiots, a D-rank and an E-rank hunter, really trying to conquer a C-rank dungeon?" However, an hour later, the two emerged from the dungeon. Everyone thought they had fled because they couldn't defeat the boss, but unexpectedly, the entrance to the dungeon closed behind them. This also shows that the two of them actually managed to conquer the C-rank dungeon, which left everyone stunned and wondering who they really were. At this point, Shun was incredibly strong, making conquering a C-rank dungeon seem as easy as a walk in the park. If it weren't for Moribisi Kenta's slow mining speed, Shun might have been able to clear it in half an hour. As Shun defeated more and more monsters, his level continued to rise, and he learned many new skills. However, using these skills consumed a lot of mana, so he needed to improve his intelligence next. Although Shun had become much stronger, he still felt that he was not yet capable of conquering the Demon Castle, as his current strength was only between B rank and A rank, and conquering an S rank like the Demon Castle was impossible. At this time, the system notified Shun that he had reached a certain level and could change his job by completing a task. Meanwhile, inside the Byakko Guild's building, Shishido Kushiru received a bidding document for a C-rank dungeon. Someone was willing to pay 150 million for a C-rank dungeon, which he first thought was a rich young man trying out life. But the next second, he saw Shun's name in the document and learned from his assistant that the other members of the assault team were just fillers, with only Shun and Moribisi Kenta entering the C-rank dungeon. Shishido Kushiru immediately remembered that Shun was a survivor of the double dungeon and speculated that Shun must be a second-time awakener, but the assistant was skeptical. Shishido Kushiru explained that Shun had survived 3 major incidents: the double dungeon, the annihilation of Huang Dongsuk's squad, and the Taisei murder of a prisoner. Nearly all participants in these events had died, but Shun, an E-rank hunter, had survived. If he wasn't a second-time awakener, none of this could be explained. If he could recruit Shun to the Byakko Guild, he would definitely receive a large bonus. Soon, they arrived at the entrance of a C-rank dungeon, but the people in front of the portal were leisurely drinking, making it look more like a camping trip than dungeon raiding. Shishido Kushiru realized that Shun's strength must be even more formidable than he had imagined, daring to solo a C-rank dungeon without any teammates. After understanding the situation, Shishido Kushiru and his assistant left. Soon, Shun cleared the C-rank dungeon and asked Moribisi Kenta if there were any tasks scheduled for tomorrow because he had an urgent matter to handle. Moribisi Kenta said that he had booked 3 C-rank dungeons for the next day and suggested they could cancel if Shun was busy, but Shun felt it would be a waste of money since one C-rank dungeon return was worth 150 million. Moribisi Kenta said it was no problem. According to the rules, he could reserve them for 2 days. So Shun let Moribisi Kenta keep them reserved until after he had handled his business. Soon, Shun completed today's tasks, and just as he was about to leave, Shishido Kushiru suddenly called out to him. Subsequently, the two arrived at a coffee shop. Shishido Kushiru straightforwardly invited Shun to join the Byakko Guild, and was willing to pay double what Moribisi Kenta offered to sign Shun. Shishido Kushiru was very confident, believing that no one would refuse such a generous offer. However, he underestimated Shun's importance in Moribisi Kenta's heart. Seeing that Shishido Kushiru could not produce 50 billion, Shun, not wanting to waste words, prepared to leave. "You wouldn't investigate me behind my back, would you?" Before Shishido Kushiru could explain, he realized Shun had already disappeared. The next second, a cut appeared on Shishido Kushiru's face, clearly indicating that Shun had an invisibility skill and was still near him. Therefore, he explained to Shun that someone had been monopolizing the C-level dungeons, preventing the Byakko Guild's newcomers from training, which severely affected the guild's development. So, while investigating who was monopolizing the C-level dungeons, he inadvertently discovered Shun's presence. Shun hoped Shishido Kushiru would keep this a secret, and mentioned the monopoly of the sea-level dungeons would continue for a while. Shishido Koshiro felt troubled as they couldn't train newcomers this way. Thus, Shun proposed to sell the 3 sea-level dungeons he had reserved to Shishido Koshiro for 300 million each. Missing this opportunity might mean a long wait before getting another chance at a sea-level dungeon. Shishido Koshiro knew Shun was inflating the price, as the mana stones and magic stones from a sea-level dungeon, even if fully mined, would be worth at most 200 million. "If it's 200 million, I'll buy it," he said. Shun agreed without hesitation, which puzzled Shishido Koshiro. Is bargaining really that easy these days? Although it was strange, he still bought the 3 sea-level dungeons, at least having something to show for it. The next morning, Shun received a 600 million transfer from the Byako Guild, unaware that these dungeons were ones Shun had intended to cancel. Meanwhile, inside the Byako Guild, Shishido Koshiro also discovered that many sea-level dungeons were still not bid on, and the current bidding price was less than 70 million. Not only did he fail to poach a member, but he was also outsmarted by Shun, which was quite embarrassing. But the next second, Shishido Koshiro received a text from Shun, conceding defeat graciously, truly acknowledging that one should not underestimate Shun. Not long ago, Shun received a class change quest. So far, Shun had entered 2 hidden dungeons, but this was the first time he encountered a task directly intervened by the system. However, to grow stronger, Shun had no choice. The moment he confirmed, a massive black hole appeared in the sky, followed by numerous purple lightning strikes to the ground. A mysterious door appeared out of nowhere. Shun then remembered he hadn't completed today's daily task, so he planned to do it after the class change, not knowing this decision would later save his life. As soon as Shun entered the dungeon, he received a system notification that the use of potions and the shop were prohibited, and even leveling up would not restore his status. Before completing the mission, he could not leave. At that moment, a knight appeared before Shun. Shun drew his weapon and charged at the enemy. In that brief second, Shun slashed the knight several times, but unfortunately, these strikes did not inflict any damage on the knight. The knight turned and attacked Shun. After blocking the attack, Shun quickly created some distance and launched a critical counterattack, but the armor's defense was too high. Even a direct hit was ineffective. In contrast, the knight's attacks easily harmed Shun. This was a clear case of a tank class overpowering an assassin class. Fortunately, Shun had experience fighting opponents with hard shells. If weapons were ineffective, he would aim to decapitate them directly. After killing the knight, before Shun could catch his breath, several more knights appeared behind him. 2.5 minutes later, Shun had successfully eliminated all the knights. Just as he was about to rest, a sense of crisis overwhelmed him. Shun quickly drew his weapon and stabbed behind him. Unexpectedly, besides knights, there were also assassins here capable of using invisibility skills. This was followed by a magical attack, indicating the presence of mage classes. With 3 different classes appearing behind him, Shun had to utilize different abilities to respond. The most troublesome were the mages, who needed to be countered with intelligence. Unfortunately, Shun had not invested in intelligence, resulting in a shortage of mana. Soon, Shun's fatigue level reached 66 points. It seemed necessary to end the fight quickly. After a tough battle, Shun finally eliminated all enemies and obtained considerable equipment from them. After donning the equipment, Shun found that it not only concealed him, but also did not hinder his movements. Fully prepared, Shun pushed open the door to the boss room. A terrifying pressure hit him face on. Just the aura alone indicated that this boss was not to be trifled with. As soon as he entered the room, numerous torches lit up, and a mysterious knight in red armor slowly approached Shun. This knight was Igris, the final boss of the instance. Standing before the throne, Shun broke out in a cold sweat. Igris's terrifying presence was comparable to that of a giant statue. Before Shun could recover, Igris charged at him with astonishing speed. A mere regular slash was powerful enough to instantly destroy the palace's giant columns. Then, Igris swung his sword again, sending Shun flying. Each strike filled Shun with dread. Despite wearing such heavy armor, Igris's speed was incredible. This was no longer describable as merely monstrous. However, Shun did not give up and launched an attack. His usually unbeatable agility meant nothing in front of Igris. No matter how Shun attacked, he could not harm Igris in the slightest. Even successful hits were easily blocked by Igris's tough armor. Igris's strength completely overwhelmed him. Shun fell into self-doubt. Was this an enemy he could really handle? But he soon rallied. Since weapons could not penetrate the armor, he decided to use his fists to inflict damage inside the armor. Seeing Shun sheathe his weapon, Igris also displayed chivalry by throwing away all his weapons, wanting a true man-to-man duel with Shun. The next moment, Igris launched a fierce attack on Shun and easily shattered a wall with just a punch, causing debris to keep falling. At this time, Shun was gasping for air. The next second, Isao also counterattacked, but even with Knight's gauntlets for defense, he couldn't fully block Igris's attack. A series of combos took at least 500 points of Shun's health, and a direct hit could likely be fatal on the spot. Since he couldn't match the attack power, Shun decisively activated the sprint skill to maximize his speed and tried to find an opportunity to attack. However, Igris remained unflustered, easily dodging all of Shun's attacks. No matter how much Shun increased his speed, Igris seemed to easily see through it and counterattack. Shun's pride in his speed was worthless in front of him. After a few brief exchanges, Shun was completely at a disadvantage. He was thrown violently by Igris and crashed heavily against the wall. Shun's system panel indicated an increase in passive defense. The next second, Igris threw a large rock at Shun. The real hunt was just beginning. The collapse of the building caused a lot of dust. Igris looked back and saw Shun burst out from the dust and attack him. Of course, Igris was not easy to deal with and easily countered. Shun increased the speed of his legs in mid-air, landing a more damaging kick on Igris's head. The next second, Shun's pupils dilated. Things were far from simple. Punch after punch landed on Shun, throwing him around like a ball. The beating didn't end there. Shun was repeatedly smashed against the ground, completely unable to defend himself, just being battered continuously by Igris, reaching his limit, gasping for air like a defeated dog. Igris no longer felt like playing. With a casual wave of his hand, the giant sword stuck in the ground returned to him. Just as the giant sword was about to hit Shun, Shun caught the deadly strike barehanded. His strong will to survive allowed him to break his own limits. He shouted that he hadn't lost yet and blocked Igris's attack. Then he gathered strength and materialized a weapon, but was still heavily suppressed by Igris. Helplessly, Shun grabbed Igris and charged forward furiously. Igris also fought back resolutely. Afterwards, he unleashed astonishing strength and stabbed at Igris. Unexpectedly, Igris taunted him, saying it was too shallow and needed to stab deeper. At that moment, Shun also used a skill to hit a vital point, causing the system panel to almost overload. After the smoke cleared, Shun was gasping heavily, and it seemed that Igris could no longer move. Shun instinctively stepped back, doubting whether he had truly won. Under Shun's frenzied attack, Igris was finally defeated. In addition to gold coins, return stones, and skill stones, Shun even obtained a helmet identical to Igris's. This was an S-class top-tier equipment that not only reduced damage by 15%, but also increased stamina and strength by 20 points each. Shun found it strange that although Igris had been killed, the system had not yet indicated that he had cleared the level. The next second, numerous black vortexes appeared behind Shun, and at that moment, the system sent a prompt. The real class change quest begins now. The longer the duration, the higher the points earned, and the more likely a hidden class will appear. Subsequently, a large number of knights emerged from the vortexes. Shun gritted his teeth and fought them, but no matter how many knights he killed, their numbers did not decrease, but instead seemed to increase. The focus of this class change quest was on enduring. Thus, Shun activated his invisibility skill to buy time, but the next second, a mage directly used the True Eye skill to break Shun's invisibility. The knights surged forward and attacked Shun furiously. Shun fought hard and killed several hundred knights, but was also reaching his limit. If this continued, he would surely be doomed. Just as Shun was about to use the return stone to escape, a heavy hammer knight suddenly appeared and smashed Shun's arm hard, sending the return stone flying. Now, even the only means of escape was gone. How could Shun resolve this crisis? He had no choice but to fight the knights head-on. Although the combat power of a single knight was negligible, facing such a large number of knights, even Shun could only stand and take the hits. However, Shun still did not give up. It was precisely because he had always been at the bottom that he understood the sadness of the lower levels better than anyone. Reaching the top had always been his wish, and he was willing to fall into the abyss for it. At that moment, Shun suddenly heard taunting voices around him. Being the weakest weapon as a human, you should be aware of your place. There's no need to try so hard for an elusive goal. Even the once weak version of himself stood out to mock him. As an E-class hunter who had grown to this point, you should feel satisfied. Although his appearance and physique had undergone a great change, only the exterior had changed. His heart was still as weak as ever. In the end, wasn't he still hovering on the edge of death? Before Shun could retort, a knight pinned him to the ground. In the end, nothing had changed. It was just like that time. Just when Shun was about to give up, the system suddenly sent a prompt. Today's daily quest was incomplete. The corresponding penalty would now apply. The next second, the sword in the knight's hand chopped down. When Shun opened his eyes again, he found himself transported to the penalty area. Unexpectedly, the penalty area that almost took his life last time saved him in a critical moment this time. Sometimes, luck is also a part of strength. Since the penalty area did not prohibit the use of potions, Shun bought a bunch of potions to restore his fatigue. At that moment, several giant centipedes emerged from the desert. The once nightmarish demon now looked unexpectedly adorable. Shun leapt up and began a new bout of fierce fighting. After 2.5 hours of battle, Shun had leveled up several times, even restoring his condition to its peak. With 10 minutes left before leaving the penalty area, he had to update his equipment now. Shun browsed the system store and unexpectedly found a Night Slayer, which could increase damage against armored enemies by 25%. Then Shun crushed a skill stone that had dropped from Igris, learning a skill called Hand of the Dominator, which could affect objects without consuming MP. It seemed to be Igris's skill of retrieving his sword through the air. Shun tried this skill on the giant centipedes, but due to low proficiency, the movement failed. It seemed that he was still unable to move objects of large volume. Soon the penalty time ended, and Shun was teleported back to the dungeon. With the enhancement from the Night Slayer, Shun moved through the nights like a war god, with no knight able to withstand his sword. But soon he noticed something odd. Despite having killed so many knights, he hadn't gained any experience, and although the mages were casting spells, they hadn't attacked him with magic. Shun soon discovered a portal behind the mages. It appeared these knights were summonings of the mages existing like props, which is why killing these knights didn't grant him any experience. So, Shun changed his approach and chose to directly attack the mages. Seeing the situation turning against them, the mages jointly cast a spell, summoning a giant knight. Shun naturally wouldn't waste time with it. While dodging the giant knight's attacks, he used its body to jump onto a chandelier, then cut the chain to use the chandelier to block the giant knight's line of sight. Finally, he leapt down towards the 3 mages. The remaining knights tried to intercept Shun, but their numbers were too few to stop him. Shun used a flash to get directly in front of the mages and achieved a triple kill. But strangely, after killing the mages, the giant knight did not disappear. Of course, Shun wouldn't indulge it and told it to stop. A fierce collision emitted a dazzling light, and the next second, Shun broke through the giant knight's armor, the powerful energy shattering the surrounding buildings, and finally, the giant knight also fell to Shun. After killing all the monsters, the system also prompted that Shun had completed the class change quest. Shun thought he would change into an assassin-type class, but the system unexpectedly offered him a necromancer class change. Shun was puzzled. He had never boosted his intelligence, so why choose a magic-based class for him? Although summoning the undead to fight for him was cool, his attribute points had always been primarily in strength. Wouldn't his previous attribute investments have been completely wrong? Thus, Shun decisively chose to refuse. But the next second, the system reminded him that Necromancer was a hidden class and asked again if Shun wanted to refuse. Just as Shun was hesitating, he suddenly remembered the mages who had summoned the knights. These mages also used summoning magic, much like necromancers, but the mages themselves had no combat ability, while he possessed significant melee skills. After all, an assassin who doesn't want to be a mage isn't a good assassin. Thinking this, Shun decisively chose to accept. Because Shun met all the hidden conditions of the job transition quest, he earned extra points, skipping the first transformation of a necromancer and directly becoming the Shadow King. The moment the class change was successful, Shun also heard the lament of the knights and received prompts to extract souls. The system reminded Shun to set the command for soul extraction. After thinking for a moment, Shun set the command to stand up. The next second, one by one, the souls stood up. Shun was thrilled to see this. Countless black knights stood before him. This was too awesome. So, they are the Shadow Soldiers, including knights and mages, and these guys also had their own levels. If he could extract A-level or S-level souls, they should inherit the abilities they had in life. Then Shun looked at Igris beside him. He tried to make Igris stand up, but Igris burst out with great energy, seemingly resisting Shun, and naturally, this attempt to extract the soul failed. Now, only 2 chances remained. Shun took a deep breath and continued to issue the command to Igris to stand up, but the situation was the same as before. Igris directly refused Shun. At this moment, Shun uttered the most classic line, "Don't protect that ownerless throne. Protect me, who stands before you." Then, a powerful energy burst out from within Igris, and the next second, the red armor was shed, and he stood up again, reborn with an awe-inspiring aura. The system indicated that the extraction was successful and allowed naming for soldiers above the knight level. Without a second thought, Shun named him Igris. "This is your name, soldiers. I look forward to your performance."